Oh, my goodness, dear friends, have you heard the latest whispers from Salem? She can't seem to shake him loose from her thoughts. And now, just when she's found happiness with Alex, it's like Bobby's shadow is stretching over her life again, chilling her heart and pushing her away from the man who loves her. What's a girl to do when the past won't let go? Will Alex fight to keep her, or will he step back, heartbroken, as she drifts away? This week's episodes are going to be a roller coaster, friends, and I'll be right there with you, watching every tearful glance and whispered word. Tune into NBC Peacock because we're about to find out if love can conquer the ghosts that haunt Stephanie Johnson, or if this cold spell might just break everything apart. It was a crisp Monday afternoon on February 24th, 2025, and the small town we've come to know so well was buzzing with tension. The air felt heavy as if it knew secrets were about to spill out into the open. For Stephanie, the day started innocently enough until it took a turn she'd never forget. A shocking encounter at Rafe's house. Picture this. Stephanie, a kind-hearted woman with a fiery spirit, marched over to Rafe's house. She wasn't in the mood for games. Her friend Jada had been hurt and Stephanie wanted answers. She knocked on the door, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face a storm cloud of anger. Inside, someone or something was waiting. Now, let's rewind just a bit. Earlier that day, the man we've known as Rafe wasn't acting like himself. He sat slouched in his chair, his laptop open in front of him. With a loud slam, he shut it, muttering, "I'm bored with this garbage." He wasn't talking about work emails, mind you, he was fed up with something far less innocent. Restless and looking for a thrill, he picked up his phone and dialed Savannah, a woman he thought might entertain him. "Come over," he barked into the receiver. "I need a distraction." But when the knock finally came, it wasn't Savannah who stood there. It was Stephanie, her eyes blazing. She didn't waste a second. "Why did you do this to Jada?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Roberafe, as she'd started calling him in her head, sensing something off, just leaned against the doorframe, smirking. "It's not your job to worry about her," he said coolly. Stephanie's heart sank. She cared about Jada deeply, and she knew Rafe did too once upon a time. "I just want to help," she pleaded, her anger softening for a moment. But that moment didn't last long. What happened next was like something out of a nightmare. That smirk on his face twisted into something darker. Before Stephanie could react, he grabbed her head with both hands and forced his lips onto hers. The shock hit her like a punch. She shoved him away with all her might, her knee flying up to deliver a swift kick. "You disgusting pig," she yelled, her voice trembling with rage and betrayal. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. As she stumbled down the street, her mind raced. That wasn't Rafe, not the Rafe she knew. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. A flash of memory and a haunting truth. Back at the pub later that evening, Stephanie couldn't stop shaking. She sat across from her friend Alex, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. He shoved his tongue down my throat," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex's face darkened. He shot to his feet, fists clenched, ready to march over and confront Rafe himself. "I'll kill him," he growled. "No, wait." Stephanie grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Her eyes were wide, flickering with a mix of fear and realization. "I can't shake this feeling, like déjà vu. Like this has happened before." Alex frowned, sitting back down slowly. "What do you mean? Has Rafe ever flirted with you like that?" Stephanie's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, horrified. "Oh my God. What if it's not Rafe?" Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Years ago, Arnold took over Rafe's life. And he did things to me back then. Awful things." Alex's jaw dropped. Arnold? The name sent a chill down his spine. Could it be true? Was the man they'd all trusted really an impostor? Meanwhile, at the Dimera office across town, the day wasn't any quieter. In the sleek, modern Dimera office, Gabi's cousin Javi sat at her desk, twirling a blonde wig between his fingers. He stared off into space, lost in thought, until the door swung open. In breezed Leo, his usual dramatic flair on full display. Javi quickly plopped the wig onto his head, striking a pose. Leo stopped short and grinned. Well, you look like a dollar store Heather Locklear," he teased. Javi laughed, but the mood shifted when Leo dropped his big news. He was back at the Spectator. This time as a journalist, not just a gossip columnist. Javi clapped him on the back, genuinely thrilled. But then his smile faded. "I told Jada about the fraud," he admitted, worry creasing his brow. Do you think that was a mistake? Leo waved a hand dismissively. Oh, honey. Rafe was never fair asking you to keep quiet about it. You did the right thing. Javi nodded, but unease lingered in his chest. Gabi's fury ignites. Speaking of Rafe, or whoever he was, things were heating up at Gabi's house. She burst through the door like a tornado, her eyes locked on her brother. How could you lie to Jada like that? She shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. Javi told me everything. Rafe didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. Of course he did. The Queen's got a big mouth. Gabi's blood boiled. She stepped closer, jabbing a finger at him. What is wrong with you? You've been acting like a stranger. Then he said it, a single word that stopped her cold. Slut. He sneered, his tone dripping with venom as he ranted about how she treated him. For a moment, Gabi just stared, her hands trembling. If looks could kill, he'd have been a goner right then and there. She didn't know who this man was anymore, but one thing was clear. The brother she loved was slipping away, or maybe he'd been gone for a long time. A quiet lunch interrupted. Meanwhile, in Horton Square, Marlena and Kat were enjoying a rare peaceful lunch. The sun shone down, glinting off the cobblestones, and the chatter of passers-by filled the air. They were deep in conversation when Chad strolled up to their table, his easy smile lighting up his face. Mind if I join you ladies? He asked, pulling out a chair. Marlena's phone buzzed just then. She glanced at it and sighed. Duty calls. Back to the office for me. She stood, leaving Chad and Kat alone. Kat fidgeted with her napkin, her cheeks flushing. I'm probably the last person you want to work with on this fundraising thing, she said, half laughing, half apologizing. Chad just shook his head, his smile warm and genuine. Not at all. We'll figure it out together. For a moment, the chaos of the day faded, and the two of them started tossing around ideas, unaware of the storm brewing elsewhere. The pieces fall into place back at the pub. Stephanie's revelation hung heavy between her and Alex. The idea that Arnold, some twisted shadow from the past, had stolen Rafe's life was almost too much to process. But the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. The aggression, the cruelty, the way he'd forced himself on her. It wasn't Rafe. Couldn't be. We have to tell someone, Alex said, his voice firm. Gabi, Jada. Everyone needs to know. Stephanie nodded, determination replacing her fear. You're right. If Arnold's back, we can't let him hurt anyone else. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the town braced itself for what was coming. Secrets were unraveling, loyalties were fracturing, and the truth, ugly as it might be, was clawing its way to the surface. February 24th was a day no one would forget, a day that promised more twists and turns in the saga of love, betrayal, and hidden identities.